Good afternoon. We're going to get started. Welcome to Roosevelt House. We are graced by the presence of Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney and the director of Roosevelt House, Harold Holzer. For both of you. My name is Jessica Neuwirth, and I am the Rita E. Hauser Director of the Human Rights Program here. Together with Remember the Women Institute, we are very pleased to be presenting this event on intimate partner violence, art education, and advocacy. In the early days of my career, one of the first projects I worked on at Amnesty International was the Human Rights Now Tour, a rock concert extravaganza that was organized to bring public attention to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights on its 40th anniversary in 1988. 40 years earlier, Eleanor Roosevelt, in whose home we are gathering, chaired the UN Commission that drafted this document. But too few people were, and to this day are, aware of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And as we traveled around the world with artists like Bruce Springsteen and Sting in tow, I saw firsthand the magical power of art to reach out to people and communicate in a way that music can do so much better than words. So I was delighted when Rochelle Seidel, the founder and director of Remember the Women Institute, came to us with this event on art and advocacy. When it comes to intimate partner violence, too many people do not take it seriously enough. Maybe they do not realize how deadly it is. Here in the United States, thousands of women die every year as a result of intimate partner violence, and the United Nations has said that around the world, 1 out of 3 women will be beaten or raped in her lifetime. The art highlighted today can help us change that. It's a great pleasure to introduce Rochelle Seidel, who has spent her career working to document and publicize violence against women. She is one of the leading scholars on sexual violence in the Holocaust, an issue that for years was deliberately suppressed. Because of the pandemic, we have waited almost 2 years for this event to take place. I very much look forward to today's program. Please welcome Rochelle Seidel.
Thank you, Jessica. Welcome to everybody. Our symposium that indeed has taken some time to come to fruition, but it actually has, and I'm very happy to see everybody. Our partner is the Human Rights Program at Roosevelt House Hunter College, and I want to thank very much Roosevelt House for giving us this wonderful opportunity. The director, Harold Holzer, is here, and Jessica Neuwirth, who has been working with me on this saga for a long time, and Katrina Avila, who has been amazing in so many of the details that finally brought us to today. I want to thank our co-sponsors, the Consulate General of Israel in New York and Pace Women's Justice Center. You'll hear about that a little bit later, one of our panelists. And we have an amazing, wonderful lineup of panelists and presentations. I really thank everybody for generously sharing time and wisdom and talent to be part of this today. I want to thank Joan Dean, who is not only a colleague in this, but a dear friend who has been at my side during this very long saga as well. And Samantha McLaughlin, who's working with me in Remember the Women Institute and really helping to spread the word with website, e-blasts, and so on. And I want to thank, we have donors to the entire program that we have of intimate partner violence, not necessarily just today, but all of the programs we've been doing. And I would like to just acknowledge the Edward and Holly Gersh Foundation, the Embassy of Israel to the United States, the Five Millers Family Foundation, Ariella Heilman, Patty X with Kenner, and Marilyn Type, and I think some of them are here today. So we're here, we've delayed, we've rescheduled, and we're doing this both live and by Zoom, and it's so great, to be live. You have to kind of look down and say, hey, am I wearing shoes? Because, for so many of the meetings that you've been in for so long, God knows what you were wearing sitting there. So it's really wonderful to see the room like this. And for those of you who are watching on Zoom, that we have a beautiful program and biographies, and you can see them on our website. I don't know whether it got onto the chat in Zoom because I forgot to ask, to tell the truth, but anyhow, we have it all for you to see eventually. We're very honored today to have with us Representative Carolyn Maloney, who was first elected to Congress in 1992 and is the chair of the House Committee of Oversight and Government Reform. And she's the chief House sponsor of the Equal Rights Amendment and a major proponent of the Violence Against Women Reauthorization Act, which just was recently signed into law. We also, you can applaud her. We also have with us another distinguished guest who is Consul Adva Vilchinsky, who is the Consul for Public Policy for the Israel Consulate in New York. And she's responsible for engagement with civil society across the consulate's 5-state jurisdiction. That's New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Delaware. And several years ago, the Israel Consulate, actually it was before she was here, and I think before her predecessor was here, brought us from Remember the Women Institute together with the She's Gone Israeli art installation about intimate partner violence, which is how I got into this actually, and we've been working together on this for some time. So I'm going to invite first Carolyn Maloney and then Adva Vilchinsky to speak, and I'm not going to get up between them. So it will be one and then follow with the other. Thank you.
Thank you, Rochelle, for your leadership on this and your leadership on so many issues. Rochelle and I worked together for Senator Orenstein when we were kids. And I don't think we've gone very far in our lives, Rochelle, because we're still working on the same issues and dedicated for empowering, protecting women in any way, shape, or form. We wouldn't be here today without the Roosevelt House, and I thank the Roosevelt House and, of course, Eleanor Roosevelt, who was such an inspiration. Earlier today, there was a luncheon in her honor and memory at the Roosevelt program. But in any event, when there was an opening for the Public Policy Institute, I literally recommended Harold Holzer for the job. I had worked with him in numerous other jobs, and he at one time worked for the great Bella Abzug. He has more great stories on Bella that are not only entertaining but insightful and inspiring, and he hasn't disappointed me. He's had one great show after another. I knew he would be sensitive to these issues that were so important, not only to Rochelle and myself, but to Eleanor Roosevelt. And I'm very honored to be here. I just have to thank all of the funders for it. I think it's very important. Too often women's issues are forgotten or swept under the rug or not even thought about at all. And Holly Gersh, I heard your name mentioned as one of the funders. I just wanted to thank you and everyone else. She happens to be a personal friend, so I'm calling her out. And I want to tell you that I appreciate what you're doing. And of course, my great friend, Joan Dean, always a pleasure to see you. And the founder of Equality Now and the ERA Coalition, which has done more to push the ERA to the front, is Jessica Neuwirth. And the older I get, the more I see how important this law, this constitutional protection is, that we can't enforce equal pay for equal work unless we ratify the Equal Rights Amendment. And I want to applaud all of her extraordinary creative work in that area. I want to thank you for inviting me. Joan invited me, my dear friend, and it's exhibitions like She's Gone, which are not only heart-wrenching, but they are excellent tools for bringing awareness to domestic violence. It really, I keep looking at the clothing and thinking about the possibilities the women had for a productive, wonderful life, and it's really heartbreaking. They also give us a chance to remember those who've been harmed or lost their lives to domestic violence, from Sissy Mapes, who was brutally murdered by her husband, to Jana Lynn Mackey, who was killed by her ex-boyfriend at just 25 years old. These are just two examples of the many victims of intimate partner violence across the world and in our country. We live in a world where an estimated 10 million people in the U.S. face family and domestic violence, and sadly, domestic violence, particularly during COVID, was very, very much on the rise across our country. And interpersonal violence was a public health crisis in the United States. But the coronavirus pandemic has further enabled abusers to use the tools of isolation and control against their victims, while organizations serving survivors, have had to make do with strained resources. That's why, as chair of the Oversight Committee, I held a briefing with domestic and sexual violence service providers and advocates about their work responding to intimate partner violence during the pandemic. During this briefing, service providers emphasized the need for federal funding, federal laws, and flexibility that allows providers to serve all survivors, particularly those in underserved communities that often have difficulty assessing support. As Rochelle mentioned, I was proud to vote for and reauthorize the Violence Against Women Act. But it was the first bill that I worked on when I went to Congress. I defeated a 14-year incumbent who outspent me 4-1 and went to Congress. And the very first bill that I worked on, believe it or not, was with Joe Biden, who was then the senator, head of the Foreign Relations Committee. And in 1994, we finally passed it, and President Clinton signed it into law. And we've reauthorized it many times since then. At that time, it was really cutting edge. We had great difficulty passing it because domestic violence wasn't thought about as violence. It was thought about a family affair. Police would break up someone going into robbing a bank or anything else, but they'd see a spouse fighting and they'd say, oh, that's just domestic, I can't get involved. We had all kinds of incidents where we had to raise awareness that beating up anyone, including your wife, or especially your wife, was a crime and that should be punished and should be stopped. I remember we had all these meetings with the police department to raise awareness. I remember back in '94 there was the Puerto Rican Day Parade, maybe you remember it, where they came out and raped and stripped and did all kinds of things to women in the park after this parade, and they were saying, well, boys will be boys. What do you mean, boys are going to be boys? You're stripping someone, you're beating someone, you're raping them. That is a federal crime. It should be treated like a crime. A very important part about the Violence Against Women Act is that we attach the right to sue. So incredibly important because that brings enforcement. And it was based on the Brancala decision where a woman went to, it was really her first night at VMI, and she was gang raped. So it wasn't a question in front of people. One of them even confessed. So it wasn't he said, she said, as in many rape cases, you don't know who's telling the truth. It was absolutely true. She'd been raped. He'd even confessed. They complained to the school, their football stars. They gave them a raise. They gave them increased better housing. They did nothing to them. Christy then, she then went to the city council. They did nothing. She went to the state legislature. They did nothing. She went to the federal courts. And this was an uncontested, I confess I raped her. And they threw it out on a technicality. Women are not in the Constitution. You have to be under the Commerce Clause. What do you mean? He committed a crime, a crime. And I met with Christy Brancala. I was just captivated by her experience. I wanted to meet her. And she dropped out of school. She couldn't face people with her own humility and the fact that people didn't treat it like a crime. She was a victim, but they didn't treat her with respect. They literally gave the football stars better housing. I'm not kidding. This is a true story. And she became a barmaid. And I think the sexual violence that women confront is still a tremendous crime in our country. And we will never get rid of it until we ratify the Equal Rights Amendment, get women in the Constitution, give them the right to sue because they are in our Constitution, and then you will be able to enforce the law. But as long as it continues that people can get off, then people, it's outrageous. It's outrageous. But today we are here to remember this wonderful organization and to support it. And we need to support it. And we need increased healthcare systems to combat and respond to domestic violence. We need to put a spotlight on it more as we are today. So often it's not treated like the crime that it is, and we need to continue working to make that happen. Later this spring, I'll be introducing a bill to create a federal civil penalties for victims of non-consensual condom removal, which is better known as stealthing. I always learn something new, but this is a real crime and a real problem along with a lot of younger people. It's a grave violation of bodily autonomy and trust and must be treated as such under the law. So I am currently leading an appropriations letter to support the Debbie Smith DNA Backlog Grant Program, which I passed. It's been called the most important anti-rape bill ever, and it uses DNA not only to exonerate, but to convict. And for every person that is convicted, the FBI says you save the lives of 7 more people. Because these people are sick and they attack again, they attack again, they attack again. And the FBI says that second only to murder is the impact and harm that rape does to an individual. I have worked with a lot of rape victims, and many times they can't lead normal lives afterwards. There's no trust. And I want to end with a story that tells you why I love my job so much. And I remember when there was maybe some of you may remember it who live on the Upper East Side as I do, there was a rapist out there, and he was attacking all over the neighborhood. And this one woman was attacked, and I sort of identified with her. You know, she came, and anyway, he broke into the window, and he raped her. And the police begged her to bring charges because they caught him. They caught him outside, and she did bring charges. It went to a highly politicized story, and like many stories in rape cases, she became the criminal. He said that she was a pimp and that he'd been hired by her, and she was mad because he wasn't paying her, or she wasn't. But anyway, he won. He got off. And years later, I read this story in the front page of the New York Times where this woman told her story, and she said, because of DNA, my bill that used DNA to convict, they found her clothing, they checked it, they went back. This was like 10, 15 years later, and they convicted the guy, and he had gone out and raped 7 other women, finally was caught and was put in jail. But finally with DNA, they found that she was right. He was a rapist. And I called her up, and I said, look, I wrote the bill that I just got chills when I saw it, because I knew that my bill allowed her to put her rapist behind bars. And you know, a lot of times you write these bills, you work so hard on me, you know you will never see or know the people you're helping. But I helped this woman, so I called her up. I said, I wrote the bill. And she told me this story. I found it. She said it ruined her life. She had no trust in government or in men or anyone else. She never dated again. She never worked again. She has cats. I found this astonishing. She never even told her parents the story. This is a true story. She couldn't even tell her parents what had happened to her because she was from a strict Catholic background, and they would have been upset about it. So she never even told them. And yet this bill finally brought justification and peace, she said to her. So telling these stories and making it acceptable to tell these stories and giving support and really love and attention to people that have been so victimized. In like the cases we're hearing today, they were literally killed by their domestic violence person who wanted to control them or whatever the problem was. But it's because of organizations such as this today, and I'm so proud to be here supporting you and supporting your work, that we are making progress on these bills that empower women. I do want to close by saying that I have such trouble passing the Equal Rights Amendment. I can't pass it. I don't understand it. I just had a bill signing with the president reforming the whole post office. I can pass all these massive bills. I can't move anything hardly for women. So I was walking around the mall, and I thought, where are the women? They had everything there. And I start looking. I said, well, where's the women? You know, they got all the wars going. They got the law and order going. They got the arts going, but no women. So I came back, I said, what will bring this country together and help me pass the Equal Rights Amendment is a women's museum, because the Republicans will work on this non-controversial issue, and we'll work together, and we have a term in Congress we call confidence building. If you can't pass something, you try to find something that you can work together on, and then you build confidence and work on bigger things. This will be a confidence. So I put the bill in to put a women's museum on the mall. At the time, I thought there's no women's museum on the mall, but surely they're around the country. Well, in the 15 years it took me to pass the bill, there was such opposition to it, I couldn't believe it. I found out there's no museums that really celebrate the contributions of women. And it finally occurred to me that you cannot empower someone if you don't even recognize the work that they have done, and that it is something that inspires other people. We spend millions, hundreds of millions on STEM. I tell my colleagues, kids will learn more about seeing role models than any other way you try to make them feel better about themselves or to go into things. So 15 years later, we passed the Women's Museum on the mall. So I'm thrilled about that, and Eleanor Roosevelt will definitely be there, and probably the stories of many of the people you'll be talking about today. So it was really thrilling to finally get that passed. But now we have more work to do. We have to get the ERA ratified, and we'll have more meetings here, I'm sure, Harold, on that issue too. I thank the Roosevelt House for having me, and very much to my friend Rochelle for putting this together, and Joan Dean for putting this together. And thank you for moving awareness forward, which helps all of us achieve more to empower and strengthen the role of women in our society. And when women succeed, our country succeeds. Thank you. And as Eleanor Roosevelt said, we're in the Eleanor Roosevelt House, she always said, it's up to the women. It's up to women to get things done for women. We have to rely on ourselves. So thank all of you for being here.
Hello, thank you everyone. I'm Adva Vilchinsky from the Israeli Consulate. I'm honored to be here today to speak with you, and maybe some of you will say, why as a diplomat, a consulate will come and speak on a domestic issue of domestic violence? And I think all of us here in the room understand that it's not a local issue. Unfortunately, it's one of the biggest global threats we are all facing. And as Representative Maloney said before, unfortunately, domestic violence was raised much more now with COVID-19. And not only that the numbers were higher and higher, I think the spaces to speak about it were closed. As we were forced to be more indoor and less outdoor, we had less opportunities to have those discussions and to raise awareness. And this is actually why I really admire this exhibition, and thank you to my friend Rochelle that even before my term was trying to bring this here to United States and succeed much more than we could do during a pandemic. So what's remarkable in She's Gone, as I believe, is that the artists Karen Goldstein and Adi Levy are bringing the lives, or unfortunately the death, of those women to public spaces. So here we sit in a room, but our dream, and we will do it, time will bring us the terms to do it, was in the public space. So in Tel Aviv, in one of the biggest square, imagine Union Square, okay? Imagine that in Union Square you have 20 garments like those with stories of women. And then, I assume that everyone here in the room will support everything I say and know everything that I will say and other honored members will say here. We know. The problem is with those who are not in the room. And what was lovely about that you had to face the fact. You were walking in the street and you saw it, and you cannot ignore just, clothes in the middle of the streets. So I hope we could bring that again to the outdoor. And one little thing about myself, like before being a diplomat, I started my career actually working in Israel in a domestic violence hotline. I was both working in a hotline helping women and doing educational work at schools. And you can think that this is, I would say, the obvious things that you think that you could do while trying to support women and educate the next generation. And I think what's a very interesting trend now in Israel, and I want to bring you a little bit of Israel, is to think about new tools. What else we could do to solve this problem? And I want to tell you one little story. on an organization named the Michal Sela Project. Michal Sela is unfortunately a woman that was murdered by her husband. And they're trying, the approach of her sister, she initiated this program, and I had the honor to have a meeting with her, said, if we had the tools like the FBI, like Israel Startup Nation, like everyone are doing to try and tackle terror, okay, and crime, we would most likely minimize the number of women who've been murdered by their intimate partner. Because if we are claiming to be the startup nation, we need to do it not only in medicine and not only with, I don't know, going to space, but also in the thing that, you know, we're all going back home. So this organization was supported by our president and initiated a hackathon. They brought 2,000 entrepreneurship people that usually sit and code, I don't know, Facebook or stuff like that, and said, now let's sit here together and think about solution to end domestic violence. And it's going and trying to solve in an innovative way with technology problems at home, and not only after the event, but also preventing. And this is very important, and I think their goal, and with that I would like to end, should be our goal, is to out of the box thinking to stop this pandemic, and the target is to have 0 murder a year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Consul Vilchinsky and Representative Maloney. I know that you both are very, very personally involved with, you know, working on this, and how much you believe in this issue, and I appreciate your remarks. We're going to move to a segment of this symposium that is about artistic responses to intimate partner violence. First, if you haven't already looked, and they've been discussed already by both of our first speakers, that these garments and the posters, and if you didn't have a chance to look before, you should look after. They were given to Remember the Women Institute by the families of 2 victims in the United States, victims of intimate partner violence. We're very grateful. It's not easy for a family to part with a garment. In fact, one of them, I thank Cynthia Cooper, because one of the mothers was a friend of hers, and you really have to have some trust through something personal to you know, for them to part with this. And the clothing is supposed to be, and will be, we hope, part of the She's Gone installation when it comes to the United Nations in New York, which was the original idea. And meanwhile, we did have a small exhibition in December in the Strongen Collection in Washington, where we used these 2 garments and 3 more from Israel from She's Gone. And I left some brochures upstairs from the Washington exhibit, so if you didn't pick one up on your way out and they're still there, you can pick one up on the way when you're leaving. The dress and the boots belong to Jana Lynn Mackey, and you heard already, but she was murdered in 2008 at the age of 25, a law student that was doing her own kind of work to advocate for women. And both of the women, this one is Jana's campaign. Their families made an organization, an institution, a website to help other women after they were murdered. And the blue party dress was Sissy, or Simonette Mapes. She was local Staten Island, and she was 29 years old when her ex-husband murdered her. She was a teacher in a difficult school in Brooklyn, and she was very helpful with raising the self-esteem of the girls. She worked with them after school, and you know, it's just, they're both tragic, tragic stories. And her mother, Teresa Mapes, was supposed to be with us today on the first panel, and frankly, I'm worried about her because we hadn't heard from her lately, and she's not here, but we'll keep trying to find her. So this is about an art installation by Karen Goldstein, Israeli artist, and Adi Levy, who's her associate, and they intend it to be international. They've also, their intention has been a victim of COVID because they had planned to do a lot of traveling in the last 2 years and find garments from all over the place, particularly in Europe. And of course, they weren't able to do that. But they have clothes. You're going to see a video with the two of them talking, Karen and Adi. And they have clothing from all sectors of the Israeli society, as you'll see. They did manage to get to Greece not too long ago, and they returned to Israel with a garment from there as well. I don't think that's in the video, but I'm telling you. So this is what their hope is, and we've been trying to help them, that there will be an exhibit in United Nations. Their dream is that it should be November 25. Don't ask what year, because if I told you the original year, it already happened. And it's that's the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. So these garments will be part of that exhibition, and you're going to be learning more right now about She's Gone in a video.
Hi, my name is Karen Goldstein. I'm a film director from Israel, and I'm also the creator of the installation She's Gone.
Hi, my name is Adi. I'm Karen's co-director in the project. I'm a creative director, and I promote a few social impact projects which are close to my heart, including veganism, independent artist groups, and of course, the fight against gender-based violence.
It all began something like 4 years ago when I read again about a woman that was murdered by her husband. She was not alone, unfortunately, and she was murdered with her 2 little young boys. And I thought to myself, what will happen tomorrow or the day after tomorrow? She will be probably forgotten and it will be vanished and nobody will talk about it. So I thought, I'm an artist, I can think of something, and I have to find a way to express my feelings, my sorrow, my grief. And so I thought I can find an image, and I was looking for that. And the day after, I thought, okay, what is going on with the clothes? I mean, her clothes, her jeans, her sweatshirts, her dresses, and that's the way it began. And immediately after that, some friend that I told them about all this idea, they joined me. They were full with the goodwill to help me and to achieve these garments. And we started to research. We started to connect families. I must say that it was a very painful journey because we met the families in the most saddest point in their life, and we had to gain their trust and to tell them everything about the project and what is the purpose of that. And it was very painful and difficult. The first meeting was with the family of Ala Daher. Ala Daher was 18 years old. She was a student and she studied in Moldova. And then she came to visit her family in Israel. And while she was here, her boyfriend told her, "You are not going back to Moldova. You are going to stay here with me. I want to get married with you." She didn't accept it, of course, and he took her passport. Then she went to see her sister in Ramle. Her sister was waiting for her, and while she was waiting for her, she heard in the news about a murder taking place in a taxi. Few minutes after that, she realized that it was Allah, and also she realized that they are not going to see each other again.
In the following months, we managed to gather garments of 11 victims coming from a diverse range of backgrounds and sectors of the Israeli society. And with the amazing help of the late Nechama Rivlin, the First Lady, the wife of the Israeli president, we actually managed to launch the project in the official residence of the president and his late wife. The subject was extremely important for her, very close to her heart, and she invited all the families of the victims to her residence on the day of the launch, and the event had a huge exposure, a lot of media coverage, and since that day until today, more than 400,000 Israelis got to see the installation across Israel as it started to travel in the country. It exhibited in the Israeli parliament, the Knesset, in universities, in galleries, in cultural centers, and the municipality of Tel Aviv, and many other places.
Clearly, it is not an Israeli problem. There are around 60,000 women being murdered every year around the globe. And the next step for us was to take this project abroad and to make it international.
Thanks to the support of the Israeli Foreign Ministry, we managed to establish a network of connections which enabled us to take the project to the next phase. The idea is to reach out to local activists, organizations, and institutions to bring the exhibition to their locality, and along with their collaboration to create satellite events to broaden the discourse about the subject and to reach as many people as possible in that locality. While doing that, we also wanted to gather local garments of local victims with the long-term dream to have a cross-cultural exhibition at the UN headquarters in New York, which will be a very strong statement of solidarity, regardless of politics, about the urgent need for action against gender-based violence, showing garments from all around the world, and actually having an impact on policymakers to make a real change.
Because of COVID-19, there is a dramatic rise in domestic gender-based violence all over. So I feel that our call for action now is getting more and more urgent and crucial. Anyway, I'm very happy that we had all of us the opportunity to meet each other in this webinar, in spite of all the difficulties and all the things that happened in the last few months. So I'm very grateful for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to Karen and Adi, if you're listening in Israel, and think he's in Berlin and wherever you are, but they may well be listening. Now, I forgot when I said, truthfully, I'm a little even confused about it, but the other dress was also through a personal connection because, again, that's, if you don't earn trust, and Karen is amazing. She's been able to go throughout Israel and earn the trust of the families to get the clothing. And the blue dress of Sissy Mapes, I don't even remember the whole thing. I know that Joan arrived at lunch one day with a shopping bag and handed me the dress. I think it was through Erin Quinn. I don't know if it was through Holly Gersh as well or just through Erin or both, but I want to thank you as well. So we have the people in the room that brought us both of the dresses. I just wanted to acknowledge that. We also have in the room with us today another artist whose work has drawn attention to intimate partner violence, and she's going to introduce us to a short video of the We Rise art installation. So I'm very pleased to invite activist and artist Kat Del Buono to come and talk, and then she has a short video.
Hi, thanks for having me here. I actually wanted to talk about my Voices project, which has been, I wanted to talk about my Voices project, which is an ongoing project that focuses on domestic violence survivors. I started this project back in 2013, and it's been expanding, and I've been adding to it and traveling it across the US since then. And what I do in each city is I partner with domestic violence organizations, and I find local survivors who want to share their stories. They want to talk about what happened to them. And I film only their mouths as a way to keep them anonymous. Then I take those videos and I put them in small monitors, which then encircle a space, like a gallery or museum or whatever. And there's usually like 20, 30 monitors of all these voices. And what that does is I create a sort of immersive environment for visitors. So when they walk in, they just hear all these voices going all at once. They can't hear what they're saying, but it's just like, and I've been told it's overwhelming, which is good, because I want people to understand the enormity of the situation. So they need to make the move towards an individual monitor so that they can hear the individual's story. In a way, that's a metaphor. You need to get close in order to know the story. And that's when they hear the woman, or I have a couple of men too that I've filmed, talking about what happened to them, their personal experience, and how they got out of it. I also, with the installation, when I have the opportunity, hold panel discussions as well, because it's very important, I think, for communities to understand that this is happening in their own neighborhoods, and this is not it's their problem, it's our problem. And what they get to do is to ask questions and hear from the panelists who are advocates, survivors, sometimes policymakers, law enforcement, whomever. So that's an important part of the project as a whole. The next city I'm going to is going to be Naples, Italy, with a Fulbright, so I'm very excited about that. And I'm going there to conduct art-based research on domestic violence in Italy, but specifically on the uptick of violence that happened during COVID-19 lockdowns, which were way stricter there than we had here. So, and I'm also going to do an installation that was similar to this, and hopefully have it showing on November 25th. So that's the goal. I just want to say one more thing, that studies do show that visuals have a stronger effect on people than text alone. So it's very important for artists to continue creating works that focus on social issues. And when it comes to sensitive and serious topics like domestic violence, it's even more important, because what it does, it helps people to be a little more open to the message. And now we're just going to show a little segment of my Voices installation. I think the video is about 2 minutes long.
all the way, you know, I've gotten signed up for cremation services, I've been followed, I get anonymous hate mail, I get threatening letters.
My fiance came into my room, put a pillow over my head, and stabbed me 18 times. Left me for dead in my apartment for over 2 hours while he stood over my bleeding body and then tried to kill himself.
To me, I thought it was all my fault and that it was just, I would make excuses for my abuser.
I don't know if it was after he burned me with hot water, locked me in a closet for 3 days and didn't feed me, didn't allow me to leave, use the restroom, or when he broke my face. And now I'm desperately trying to find who I am again.
Mi esposo me maltrataba demasiado psicológicamente, que llegó al punto de hacerme creer que yo no servía para nada, que yo no podía pensar, no podía actuar. Me hizo sentir que no valía y hasta llegó casi al punto de hacer que yo me mate.
Do you know you deserve better? I was a victim of domestic violence. I was punched, kicked, stomped. I was even hit with objects. I deserve better. I deserve more. I just deserve someone to love me. I decided to get out because I realized I'm a queen and I deserve better.
Thank you, Kat. That was really so powerful, it's hard to talk. Okay, we are now coming to our first panel, and I'm going to invite the moderator, Shoshana Friedman, to please, she's the executive director of the Shalom Task Force, and she's going to introduce everyone else, and I'd like them all to please come forward. And the first panelist, Elaine Katz, I just want to acknowledge again, she's the chair of the board of Pace Women's Justice Center, and that is one of our co-sponsors of this event today. So please come forward, the first panel. Yeah, I guess. However you like to arrange yourselves. I didn't think about that. And one of the panelists will be on Zoom because her flight was canceled. Go ahead, I'm going down.
Hi, so I'm Shauna Friedman. I'm the executive director of Shalom Task Force. Come up, ladies. Before we start, I think we all need to take a deep breath. That was a lot. As someone who's been working in the field for 20 years, you know, I think what was, I'm not gonna look down there, Shauna. I think so much of our work is around awareness and outreach, and it's core to what we do at our agency, Shalom Task Force. And being here and being willing to talk about this, it just increases access and makes more people realize they're not alone. And what excites me about today, but what really is, I guess, I don't want to use the word triggering, but it was, but what really touched me is the fact that that we learn differently, and when we're able to see this and commit to this in different ways like we just did and what we will hear more about today, it's so impactful. And I think if we just take a moment and ground ourselves, because that was really very impactful, both the two installations we just saw, and I know I anticipate that as well here to hear. So I don't know how everybody else does this, but sometimes I just need to sit and feel myself sitting, if you have some water, and here I'm gonna be the therapist with you guys for 30 seconds. But I feel like I need this before we continue the more cerebral part, perhaps, but let's just take a second for ourselves. So I kind of just did my intro. It's really an exciting panel because we get to learn about the issue of domestic violence and learn about what we can do in a different way. We're entitled this panel today, The Voices of Activists Who Know, and as you'll hear, each panelist is coming from a diverse background and a range of personal knowledge and life experience, and are transforming this to help other people. The clinicians might call it as post-traumatic growth, when we have this ability to both experience the stress and trauma, but also take it to make impact and live with both. I'm going to quickly introduce each of our panelists here. And they're gonna each speak for 5 minutes. I will try to be a really good timekeeper because we have a lot we want to talk about. And they're gonna have this opportunity to reflect on their journey and their work in combating intimate partner violence and how we should support survivors and their families. And then we'll take some time at the end for questions and a discussion. So I have a few questions I had learning, but I would love to hear from the audience here and if possibly the audience on Zoom. I'm not sure exactly where you see me, but I know you're out there. So we have today, I'm going to introduce all of our panelists. We actually have 4 panelists. One's flight was canceled this morning, so see you, Judy. She unfortunately is not here. Okay, so, oh, there she is. Hi there. How are you? You don't have volume yet. Okay, great. Okay, we have Elaine Katz. She's a family law attorney from Westchester, and eradicating domestic violence became part of her life mission after the unfortunate and terrible murder of her sister, Gail, in 1985. So for more than 25 years now, she's partnered with the Pace University School of Law Women's Justice Center, a partner here today, and as the chair of and the founder of Gail's Fund that supports that work. So thank you for being here. Marjorie Pual, did I pronounce that correctly, is here from Texas. She's a motivational speaker, life coach, mentor, leader, entrepreneur, and currently working towards her doctorate in organizational leadership. I had lived through the hazing process of a doctorate. If you ever need some support, I know that very long and very well. She has dedicated her life to encouraging and helping others learn more about the tools necessary to make positive life changes. And as a survivor, she's determined to stand strong and support others. Lily, I had an opportunity to meet before, is an award-winning author and domestic violence expert who specializes in helping young people learn how to identify domestic violence, also a survivor with a powerful story, and author of Truth to Triumph. And Aaron is the founder of the nonprofit We Care and a leader of Using Education to Prevent Abuse. She's also the creator of the globally presented That's Not Okay workshop, the sales model for dismantling systemic abuse, and Share the 8. And we are looking forward to her upcoming book, Dying for Love, which is a synthesis of her personal life journey. I also want to acknowledge, it was acknowledged before, that one of our panelists, Teresa Mapes, was not able to come today, but we have here her daughter's clothes. And if you haven't had an opportunity to come up to see it, it's quite beautiful and heart-wrenching. Okay, so Alana, if you would, Elaine, sorry, if you don't mind starting and share.
Speaking. I am honored to be a member of this panel. Each panel member has endured a personal tragedy, and rather than let it ruin our lives, it empowered us. In July 1985, my sister Gail was murdered. She was the same age as Sissy when she was murdered, 29 years old. She was not what society perceives as the typical victim. She was privileged, educated, and had family support. She had recently completed her Bachelor's of Science in Psychology at Hunter and was getting her PhD in clinical psychology. Yet, she was the victim of insidious abuse, robbing her of her self-esteem, her self-determination, and the ability to protect herself. Her husband, Robert Birnbaum, a pilot and surgeon, so meticulously disposed of her body that no trace has ever been found. 15 years later, he was finally convicted of her murder in a landmark legal victory for victims. This is a school of public policy, and I have an enormous stake in helping you, the decision makers of tomorrow, to inform public policy with an understanding of and sensitivity to intimate partner violence. By the way, I also have a master's in public policy. IPV occurs in privacy and by a partner, usually without witnesses, except frightened children. It is no wonder that a victim is confused, ambivalent, ashamed, and easily manipulated into believing that it is their fault or that it will never happen again. And therefore, it's not surprising that the question I am most often asked is, why didn't Gail just leave? This inquiry carries with it the corollary. It was Gail's fault that she was murdered because she should have just left. So first of all, Gail left. In the winter of 1984, she was studying for her GREs, and she was so stressed that she violated one of Bob's many rules. She smoked a cigarette on the deck. Bob came home early, became enraged, and strangled her to unconsciousness. And talking about what Representative Maloney said, yep, she went to the police, and they told her to go to family court. There were the marks on her neck. This wasn't attempted murder. This wasn't assault. This was a domestic matter. Gail left and stayed. See, Gail left and stayed with our family in Brooklyn. And Bob courted her and promised her it would never happen again. And like so many other women, Gail returned, believing that she was safe. Why do women return? For their children's stability, the belief that it won't happen again, and most importantly, the lack of practical options to stay separated and safe. How often do you think a woman tries to leave an abuser until she finally succeeds? An average of 7 times. Gail tried to leave a second time. On July 6th, 1985, she searched apartment ads and contacted prospective landlords. That evening, Gail told Bob of her decision to separate, and Bob killed her. He dismembered her, put her remains in a duffel bag, drove to Caldwell Airport, rented a private plane, flew out over a body of water, and banking the plane, rolled the duffel bag out the window and into the water. So why don't victims just leave? Because abusers threaten that if you leave, they will leave you penniless. Have you deported, take your children away, kill your beloved pets, kill your children, and kill you. And the statistics prove that these threats are a reality. It is 70 times more likely to be killed during the weeks following separation than during any period in a relationship with an abuser. And it's not only dangerous for the victim. More than half the batterers abuse their children. And 22% of law enforcement fatalities occur during domestic violence calls. Why do we call it domestic violence? Police are being killed, children are being killed. I know we're supposed to call it intimate partner violence. So is my message don't leave? Of course not. We need the funding that affords social service agencies and public health grad schools the resources to develop and implement good safety plans. My journey from grief to empowerment started more than 25 years ago. The Pace Women's Justice Center was a small organization focused on defending women who assaulted or murdered their abusers. And I ran into the deputy director waiting to put our children in the TWOS program at the local JCC. And as the needs of the IPV victims for civil legal services grew, my friend, the deputy director, would call me because my expertise as a family law attorney became valuable to them, and a collaboration was born. Today, the center is, among other things, the largest civil legal services provider in Westchester and Putnam County, specializing in domestic violence, sexual assault, and elder abuse. They do a tremendous amount of community outreach and training also. These informed services are often the difference between healthy families, broken lives, and increasing fatalities. As advocates and public policy students, I hope that in 30 years, you will be sitting at this table and talking about how far we have come since 2022 in developing even better practices and programs to create only survivors and end intimate partner violence.
Thank you so much. Whenever I do talk about why, people always ask, why do they stay? And I always say we have to reframe it. I say, what are the barriers to coming forward for help, right? When we say, like you said, when we say, why do they stay? Why does she stay? We're giving her the burden, right? And we're blaming the victim. And how do we reframe that? What do we need to do as a community, as a society, that people could come and get the help that they need? Marjorie, are you able? Let's hope for that.
I'm here.
There we
Can you
go.
hear me?
Yes, we can. Can you hear us?
Okay. Yeah, I'm here with you. First of all, let me pull myself together and tell all of you my heart is with you, because I totally understand what you're going through. I understand the harshness of violence because the perpetrator of that abuse sits on the other side and enjoys what he does, and there's something really wrong with that. So I want to go to the question of why don't we leave? Because I'm going to enjoin with all of those women. I'm not going to stand on the other side and say them, all of us. Why don't we leave? Because we're raised not to leave, being women. Culturally, of all culture, women are taught to be and behave a certain way. So when we find ourselves in positions that are not normal positions, we don't really know what to do. And usually we reach out to someone and either someone becomes judgmental, they turn their back, or they tell us there's nothing that they could do about it. Thank you, ladies, for doing something about it. It has to change. It is the mindset that has to change. Unless you change the mindset, the violence will continue on. Unless you teach people not to hurt and not to stay where they're being hurt, it will not change. The police department has to change. I was told things at the police department that I would love to kind of punch them in the nose for, because they judged me. They had their own opinion about what was going on with me, but you don't know me. Michelle Kaminsky, if you're there, I love you. Thank you so much. She was my back. She helped me work through it because there were times I couldn't speak. What had happened to me ripped every bit of strength away from me. Not because of what other people thought, but just because of me, what I lost. And I'm still regaining it. I'm still fighting for the power to stand. And I may not be on your forum, but whenever I'm with young women or even young men, I'm telling them abuse is not tolerated. And it doesn't make you a strong person, it makes you a weak person. Standing up to an abuser is a very difficult thing when we don't support them. My family did not support me. They gave me phone calls, but not one person came to me and held me and said, "You'll be all right. I got your back." 2 friends did do that, but my family, whom I needed, didn't do it. So my plea to you is don't be judgmental of these women who are being abused, or even if they're men or children. Don't be judgmental. Be a support. Put your hand on their back. They're not going to do what you want them to do. They have to learn that it's okay to do what you want them to do. They have to learn that if I leave, somebody's got me and this person's not going to get me. They have to learn that someone's going to be there for them through this time, because when I tell you these abuses strip you of everything, it strips you of everything. It took all my power to battle to get my degree. And it's taken all my power to continue on for my PhD, but I cannot give him the power to change my life. Only I can change my life. I thank you all for allowing me to be there with you. Know that my heart is with you. If you need me, Michelle knows how to get in touch with me, but stand strong together as a full worldly team, not a cultural team, but a worldly team of women that we say, no, we're not going to take your abuse anymore. Stop. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to say thank you. I love you all for being here. That common question, why did you stay? This question speaks volumes to the underlying judgment and stigma that is placed on the victim. In fact, re-victimizing the survivor has become so prevalent that shame and disgrace has become part of the mental dialogue of a survivor's everyday life. And we wonder why our youth grow up believing that they're not enough. When someone's house gets robbed, we don't ask, why did you go out? And yet when someone is beaten by an intimate partner, we ask, why did you stay? Or why didn't you speak out sooner? The real ask, the productive inquiry, the compassionate question is how? How did this happen? What methods, to what degree, what were the conditions? How can we help? Medical care, food, shelter, safety. How can we stop this from happening to someone else? Prevention, resources, systemic protocol. How can we eradicate IPV? The question is how. I would argue that when we serve others, we serve ourselves. We serve humanity. We serve our children by leaving them a society that understands relationship health, that holds no space for violence. IPV is not a private matter, and clearly it's not public. It's not personal. We see how it affects our universities, the workspace, our communities, even our police force. Why do our systems treat IPV as a private matter, and what should these systems be doing instead? If they want to stop the violence and do it in a way that does not bleed tragic outcome onto our communities. Just recently, we saw 2 NYPD officers respond to a domestic violence call in the Bronx who was shot mercilessly to their death. Those young men were my son's age. Those young men represent all of our sons and all of our daughters. And so I ask, how many more lives need to fall victim before we see massive change? You hear stories on major media and you follow the national headliners, but to most it's just a story. Unless you've experienced it, it doesn't have those long-lasting effects as it does on a victim or on families of victims. That's just human nature. A life comes and it goes. And in time, so does the hype. But what if I were to give you specific statistics? Did you know that 1 in every 4 women and 1 in every 7 men are victims of severe physical violence like beating, burning, and strangulation by an intimate partner in their lifetime? Let me repeat that. Beating, burning, and strangulation. 1 in 4 women, 1 in 7 men. Look around. How many people are in this room? Astounding stats. And guess what? The real stats are even higher because we know that victims, 65% of them never seek medical attention. And if they do, they don't speak out. I know, I was one of them. I remember my doctor saying to me one day, "You sure do have a lot of accidents." He never asked. He never probed. If he had, I would have felt supported and spoke out. It is critical for you to understand that it is easier than you think to fall victim of a perpetrator, and no one in this room or in our communities has immunity. No gender, no color, no race, no culture, no creed, no economic status. And the time is now. I'm sorry, I got so emotional before. No economic status, and the time has never been more urgent than now. But I have to tell you that the value in my survival is proof that anyone can fall victim. But the value for me today is twofold, because today I get to speak in universities on how to forge healthy relationships and how to identify the disguises behind IPV. And I also get to bring comprehensive IPV programming into the workspace. The time has never been more urgent. to remove the stigma and start working on fundamental solutions that eradicate IPV, that help students cultivate healthy relationships, that help survivors save their jobs and build their businesses, that help survivors heal, restore, rebuild, and live a life of dignity. We need to do more. We need to do better. The adverse domino effects that IPV has on our communities, our nation, our planet is unacceptable, and ignorance is no longer an excuse. So remember, if you cannot identify the disguises behind IPV, you won't have immunity from it, and dignity is your birthright, and that of your children's. Claim it. Thank you. I look forward to answering questions. And
Oh, thank you so much for coming and for all of the beautiful art and the wonderful advocacy and the amazing panelists and our beautiful moderator. And I definitely want to say thank you to Rochelle Seidel for making this happen. What a powerful, important piece of the puzzle to solve this issue of domestic abuse, and your dear friend Joan helping, and my wonderful friend Holly supporting this event and me. So just thank you so much. I'm very honored to be here with such extraordinary men and women. My name is Erin Quinn, and I founded We Care in 2008. And something that you said really touched me. I was that little kid hiding underneath a table like this, protecting my 4-year-old sister. I was 5. You have to forgive me if I cry, because a lot has been said and shared today that is so emotional, and I'm not a robot. But I was that child, and there's just a lot of information that we need to be sharing with our kids and amongst ourselves as adults. And one of them is that children don't witness domestic abuse. Children experience domestic abuse. I've done a lot of research in advance of publishing my book that's coming out on how it affects your brain. When you witness violence, especially consecutive incidents, and you're very young, your brain is damaged. It's different. Your amygdala is shrunken. The parts of your brain that are useful for goal setting and comprehension as an adult are affected. Your startle response is much higher. There's just so much damage that is done to a child. And worst of all, you don't see the red flags. When you grow up with only the color red, red doesn't stick out to you. So it might stand out to another person who didn't grow up that way. But I know that for myself, after one abusive relationship and another, and very nearly being murdered myself, only just through luck that my dress is not here, I didn't see the signs. And like every other person in this room, I'm an intelligent human being. So what is missing? What is missing? Why are we here? And it's just education. And I can share with you, as many other people can in this room, that education is prevention. And we did coin that phrase back in 2008 because I was going into domestic violence shelters and working hands-on with women and children. And it was so gratifying to be able to show them, not tell them, but show them, you still matter. You have worth. You're loved. You're thought of. You're important to us. Here we are. But all of the volunteers would pull me to the side and they would say, you know, I'm volunteering because I know a little something about this. And I thought, why are we whispering? I mean, why aren't we saying, me too, me too, me too? Are there any Me Too's in here? Any Me Too domestic abuse? No hands? No. I mean, do you see? Not one hand will go up for domestic abuse. But it is a part of the Me Too movement. Thank you, Tarana Burke, wherever you are. I just realized this beautiful girl said to me that she had never told her mom and dad. And I asked her why. And she said, well, I guess I just, I feel so stupid. I feel so embarrassed. She must have been the 1,000th person who said to me, I was just too ashamed. I just felt stupid. And I thought to myself, well, she should have known better, and I should have known better, and my mother should have known better, but not like, like knowing how to breathe, like being taught. You're taught how to brush your teeth because you might get cavities if you don't. You have to get a driver's permit to use a car. Where is the permit for your body, your heart, your mind, and your soul before you're in relationships? Why don't we know the signs and what to look for before the first kiss? I would just want to share a quick story about a girl whose mother gave her a book when she was 9 years old, everything about sex, everything, all the medicals, the ins, the outs, everything. And fast forward, freshman year of her high school, she was in health class. And this was pretty revolutionary because health was not a thing. And sex ed was not a thing. But anyway, finally, it was a thing. And so there was a test on the first day. Everybody, but we haven't studied yet. And the teacher said, that's okay, I just want to see where you're at. And this girl who had read everything about sex got 110, 10 extra credit points. She knew everything there was to know. Rightfully so, before the first kiss. But not a thing, not one thing about domestic abuse, intimate partner abuse. What does it look like? What is love bombing? What is being controlled? How could you be isolated by somebody? How dangerous is it, lethal, to tell a controlling human being, the control stops today, I'm leaving, this relationship is over, I'm not coming back? That person is me. I got 110 in sex ed on the first day. Not because I'm so smart, but because I was given the education. But I had one abusive relationship after another. There was a night in my life I didn't think that I would live to see the sunrise. I don't know how I got out of that. But I know what I deserved from our society and what all of you deserve from this incredible society. I deserved an education. I deserve to know the 8 early signs of abuse. I deserve to know not to tell any partner who's been controlling me, I'm gonna leave. I don't wanna be your girlfriend anymore because I could get killed. And I just wanna share also briefly that one of the best things that has ever happened in my career of education, of prevention, of a workshop that we created called That's Not Okay, was for some girls in college some years back. We went through the 8 signs and everybody was sharing. And a couple of years later, same university, same sorority, same That's Not Okay workshop, but now the sisters had their littles with them. And they said, you have to take this workshop. And we did the workshop, and one of the girls who'd been there 2 years ago said, Erin, I met someone who was abusive. And it was beginning of the relationship, and I got lots of phone calls and lots of attention, and it was really nice, but I was in the middle of finals, and I had to study, and so I couldn't answer the text messages. And by the end of the day, my phone had been blown up, and the messages went from really sweet to WTF. She said, and I remembered what you taught us, and I ended it right then and there. They'd only been together for 3 weeks. It works. It's only 60 minutes. We are hungry as human beings for knowledge. We love it. So why don't we just normalize education instead of normalizing statistics? We have the power. We have the technology. We have everything that we need except that law that says it's a must. It's mandatory before the first kiss. I know that you're going to ask a quick question.
I'm being directed at, we're out of.
Oh, we're out of time?
Quick, I have so much I want to talk about. Do you want to?
You know what? You can skip asking me any questions because I'm going to answer
Okay,
a
go for
question
it. Go
ahead
ahead.
of time, and
Okay,
then
go for
I've
it.
got nothing else to say. I was sitting here, I was looking at these dresses. One of these women, I know her mother. I know Teresa Mapes, and I spent a lot of time with them. And I'm sitting here thinking, I know that Shoshana is going to say, you know, what is one thing that you think that we should know? And I was looking at the dresses, and I thought, what do they want us to know? What would they say if they were here right now? And they would say, please, please, make sure that every little girl and every little boy, every human being knows the safe steps, how to protect themselves when they decide to leave a controlling abuser. I think that that's what they really want us to know, because if they had that information, there's a possibility that they would be here with us today. And thank you so much for everybody for sharing the stories, and thank you, Rochelle, for having me.
So, thank you. We're going to do some quick, let's do a quick round. Let's focus on that question. What would they want us to know if they are here? If you're able to respond to that. What do you feel that people don't know and they should know?
I could respond to that. I'm going to go even deeper. Above and beyond learning what we should look for, one of the biggest things today that I can attest for is maybe the apple does fall far from the tree for those who realize that they're just an apple and that they're not just an apple. And what I mean by that is many times, and it's no fault of our own, but we were raised and our parents were raised and their parents raised them to seek validation from others. We go to school, we get validated from the teacher. We get a good grade, we come home, we get validated from mommy. We score at a soccer game, and dad says, way to go. And so we learn to seek validation in others, and we need to change the narrative. We need to change a new paradigm and say, you must be so proud of yourself. I don't care what you do. Even if you're sitting in your bedroom for the afternoon, be proud and be great in what you're doing. Because the value that I learned, and surely the value that these souls learned, was that you are so perfect and significant, truly, in the landscape of the universe. And there's nothing that anyone can take away from that. But when we forget how significant that we truly are, we begin to seek validation in others. And that's the danger. That little nano space in someone that is validation seeking for no matter what it is, even the way we dress today. However you look, it means something to someone. Oh, I have to do this, I have to do that, right? I have to be accepted, especially in universities, right? But when we stop looking for validation and we just kind of know how perfect and significant we are, then there's no space for someone that's looking in, and that someone would be a perp. The perpetrator is masterful at finding those little spaces in a man or a woman's young heart, old heart, brain, wherever that is. And what they do is they, over a period of time, they take power and control over you little by little by little by little until you're completely in control and you wake up like, where the heck am I? But if you can really, really seek an answer, in short, I think that they would like everyone to know how significant that you are and how perfect you are, so that you don't fall victim. You're not someone that is highlighted to a perpetrator.
Thank you. Marjorie, do you want to have a last moment?
I think the most important thing anyone can learn is self-esteem. When you respect yourself and you value yourself with the support of your family and friends, most of all your family, because that's where you first learn acceptance, you can begin to build upon that. They don't put these programs in school. They need to be in school. When I went to school, we had home economics. I was talking to two young people the other day, and they said, we don't have that. We're trying to do some DIY, but we're doing it at home. And a lot of times society doesn't feel responsible for teaching self-esteem. But if they're not responsible, then who is? Because our children is in that environment with them, and they learn from bullies. There's so many things that have to be done, but the school is the perfect place to be, because that's the melting pot. That's the most diverse place where young people begin to learn about who they are and their character. You want to fight? To me, that's the fight. That's the fight that I'm fighting for, is to let young people know who they are and understand their own value and how emotions are fleeting. You see a guy, you become infatuated, and while you're being infatuated, you keep saying it to yourself, I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. If the other shoe doesn't drop, you're good. If the shoe drops, have the courage and the self-esteem to walk away. Thank you.
I didn't get the email, the message on the questions, but I think one of the things my sister would want everyone to know is that she was more than a domestic violence fatality. I talk about her death, but not that much about her life. And this isn't the place for that, I admit that. But I will say, thanks to the Women's Justice Center, I've been able to create a Gale's House, a Gale's Fund, and they do in some way celebrate her life and make something so very positive out of her death. The other brief remark that I would make is I hear a lot about education. I am a lawyer, and for the early part of my career, I only represented children. And I learned in family law and in the representation of children what we have in common, which is that victims are made by living in households with domestic violence. And it is the legal system, not only public policy and public health, that really has to move away from allowing abusers just to have as much contact with their children that they do, allowing this move in our society toward a joint legal custody, to a belief that under always it's two parents. This is what results. It is the growth of little abusers and little victims. And by the way, when I say little abusers and little victims, I have little abusers that are female, not only male, so I'm not being gender biased here. I have seen little girls become abusive of their mothers and become abusive of their future partners. So we didn't talk a lot about the legal, because I'm not at a law school today where I often speak. But the legal system is a very, very important piece of this, and it is about laws that have a presumption that if you've been convicted of domestic violence, you should not have joint legal custody. It is programs that really keep women safe after they've had the courage to leave. I have so many clients who stay in abusive relationships for fear of the abuse that their children will be subject to when they separate and they stop protecting their children. So this is the School of Public Policy, but the legal system needs as much, if not more, help. That is where victims are being abused as well, in the context of the legal system.
I think as we close this panel, I want to thank each one of you. I've learned so much, and I think that we're going into a weekend of celebration for many of us. You know, holidays, we have Easter, we have Pesach, Passover, and we're going to see other people. And I think if we each take this, our mandate to us, as we each sit at our holiday tables and talk about what we heard today, something that you learned, because that's how people get access to help, right? And that's how we start education as prevention. I love how you said that. That's how we think about it. You know, if we're able to talk about it and say, I was at this event and this is what I learned, and it happens to all people from every community, then people, and this event was important, and there's services out there, and you'll learn more about services very soon from some wonderful colleagues of mine, then we're able to really help people move forward. So I guess I challenge all of us to talk about this event at their celebrations this coming weekends, and I wish everybody, I guess, a happy Passover, happy Easter, happy celebrations, and thank you very much.
Thank you to our panel. It was really so moving and so wonderful of you all to share stories that are not so easily shared. Thank you, really, everybody. We're going to shift gears a little bit, and Erin mentioned statistics. We're going to have something a little bit about statistics now. A different kind of artistic representation, which is theater, and a theatrical response to intimate partner violence. I'm very pleased to introduce you to award-winning playwright Cynthia Cooper. Cindy is a longtime friend of Remember the Women Institute, and mine, I can say. And she has generously shared her talent with us a lot over the years on this subject and also on women and the Holocaust in theater. And she's going to introduce her play, All Databases Are Incomplete. It was also part of our December exhibition in Washington, D.C. And then you're going to see the video by a professional actor, Lisa Pelican, and I don't think you'll say more. I'm not going to say it. I'm going to call on Cindy Cooper.
Thank you so much, Rochelle, and thank you to the people who have presented already, and to PACE. I was able to form an alliance with them. I use theater because I think theater is one of the art forms that opens up people's hearts and minds. And this is a topic that is so hidden and that is carried by so many people, whether from their own experience, but it's hidden behind a wall, a mental wall. And through theater, you can kind of create a conversation with people where they can see a vicarious experience, they are thinking of their own experiences, and they can come up with their own responses. So I came to this, first of all, I want to say I did know Jana Mackey. I didn't know her mother before she was murdered. I knew Jana traveling as an advocate on women's issues in Kansas, and she was one of the brightest lights I had met across the country. I mean, I could envision her becoming president, honestly. She was so stunning and so fierce and humorous at the same time, and so well-informed. At 22, she was the state lobbyist for NOW in Kansas. So, and I think Jana might ask, or maybe I'm putting words in her mouth, not why didn't I leave, but why do men abuse? Why do people abuse? And why don't they stop? So I come to theater from a prior career as a lawyer and a journalist. And as a lawyer, I was privileged to work on domestic violence with some of the really bright minds in the country. One was a woman named Ellen Pence in Minnesota. And I remember, I've carried this with me since then. She was doing a talk to a group of domestic violence survivors, and they were called domestic violence at the time. And someone kind of who is angry? People are angry, they're upset. Someone said to her, what right do you have to talk to us? And she just said, I hear you. Please don't make any assumptions about my life. And I think that until we get past this barrier and try to understand that domestic violence, intimate partner violence, is experienced by many people, and they aren't talking about it, and we don't have to demand that they talk about it, but we have to be there to hear and to listen and to take action when we can. So all databases are incomplete. You'll hear in the pieces based on a little footnote I found in a Texas project, and it just seemed to me like that's about women who are murdered, but this seemed to me to speak to the whole issue of domestic violence and how widespread it is. And if we were to actually calculate it, that debt clock that they have in New York would be like, running 10 times faster. We would be having COVID reports. We would be having intimate partner reports every day in our newspaper that show numbers as high. So we have to begin to deal with the enormity of this problem without putting survivors and victims at risk, and I hope that theater can do that. By Cynthia L. Cooper. Taryn sits in a circle, speaking to her women's support group.
I'm a counter. Well, not like a kitchen counter, not like that, no. Someone who counts things, who tabulates and enumerates, like how many baseball cards, or how many balls and strikes on the scorecard, or RBIs. I didn't count the first time. I like counting. How many minutes on hold? How many shirts in the closet? How many steps to the door? The thing about counting is if you count something, then you can quantify it. And if you can quantify it, then you can manage it. And if you can manage it, then you can contain it, right? When I was a kid, we played softball at the Moriarty's. They had 8 kids, so you could always get a game going. About every 21 days, you'd hear Mrs. Moriarty scream from inside the house. A piercing sound. Whoever was pitching, and that was generally me, would hold the ball for an extra long time. When the screaming stopped, after 15 to 32 seconds, we'd go back to the game. It was later that I read about the real counters like Karen Ingela Smith in England. You know about her? In 2012, she started a project counting dead women after a woman she worked with was killed. It's because of her that we know that the pandemic is causing a spike in domestic violence. You should look her up. When I worked at Manners after school, I was more intent on counting the pre-folded napkins and the new uniforms. I did take note when Deanne, she was the hostess, came in late after walking into a door for the 5th time. I wished I'd had a number to give her, but she was my boss, so I'm not sure that would have been right. I got a new job. But then, I was already counting the clothes. How many pairs of jeans? 2 dark denim, 1 light, 1 black. According to the experts, and there are experts on this, the average American woman has 103 items of clothing, but only wears 20%, which would be 21 items of clothing approximately. Well, I don't know why I didn't count the first time. When something is first, you don't know that it's the first because you don't know there will be a second. The first time, he punched me in the head. We'd been married 45 days and were guests at a friend's house. I was putting on a big old t-shirt to sleep in. Then, bam, his fist. Apparently, something went wrong during one of those absurd newlywed games. Where would your other half most want to travel? I said England or France, I don't know, but apparently I was wrong. I could feel the swelling in my head for 9 days. Dawn Wilcox in Plano, Texas, she started Women Count USA. That's the copyrighted name, Women Count USA. You should look her up. She posts the names of women and girls murdered by men in the U.S., domestic partners and strangers alike. She collects information from newspaper articles, obituaries, Facebook. She posts pictures, one after another. Sue and Evelyn and Jacinta and Sharon and an endless scroll. Zoe and Audrey. For example, in 2018, she has 1,841 entries. A footnote says all databases are incomplete. The domestic violence networks in the U.S. count the women killed specifically by an intimate partner. In the last reporting year, that came to 1,247. For me, that kind of counting is hard to manage and contain. So I started thinking about how many jeans they had and how many tops and shorts and skirts and oversized t-shirts. The second time, well, I didn't count the second time either. That time, I came home from work and I was exhausted. I mean, we'd been married 191 days by then, and it was a terrible day. My teammate was fired. We'd worked together on party products, napkins, paper plates, designs, and names, summer splash, birthday buzz, that kind of thing. I flopped down on the bed in my work clothes, a little tan suit with pink plaid, little accent in the jacket. I nodded off, but then something jolted me awake. He was on top of me, and my skirt was wrapped around my waist, and I screamed. I didn't know what was happening, but there it was, happening. I didn't think, oh, this is rape, and rape counts. I put rape in a different category, so I didn't count it. I was worried that my skirt was wrecked. If you take the 1,247 women murdered in intimate violence and multiply them by the clothes they actively wore and loved, that would be 26,187 items of clothing. Now the third time, I definitely remember the third time. We were in the car, coming home from hanging out at a bar with friends, 3 years and 45 days of marriage. He was wearing blue jeans with a belt, and I had on a white Indian cotton top with purple stitching. When we got home, he turned off the ignition and suddenly lurched at me. He put his hands on either side of my neck and pushed his thumbs against my throat. I thought, he's strangling me. You can't really say much when you're being strangled. I started to black out, then just as suddenly let go and got out. I counted that, even when he apologized. He believe someone at the bar was making fun of him and somehow that was my fault. He cried. I never mentioned it to anyone. I just wore turtlenecks for the next 10 days. Your average medium-sized top is about 20 inches wide if you measure it across the chest. If you laid out the 26,187 favorite clothing items of the women murdered in intimate partner violence, that would stretch to 43,645 feet. Well, the length of a pro baseball field from home through center field is 400 feet. So you could lay out 109.1 baseball fields with the clothing that women owned and loved. Well, there are only actually 30 professional baseball fields in the US, so you could line each one 3.6 times. Shortly after our 5th anniversary, I was packing my bag for a job interview. They were flying me to headquarters to lead a national team working on biodegradable packaging. I was sitting on the bed, neatly folding an ivory shirt when the door flew open and he tackled me. He lifted up my t-shirt and started biting my stomach, my arms, my neck. I yelled, not as loud as Mrs. Moriarty, but there was no one to hear me. 18 times he bit me, each bite deeper than the last one. Later, when I tried on my dress, the navy one I had purchased for the interview, a little spot of blood was on the collar. I didn't feel like going to the interview anymore, but I already had my ticket. They never made the job offer. 2 years later, that was the first one I told to the therapist. She said, "Why did you wait so long?" "I don't know," I said. "We're talking about your life," she said. "Your life counts." "Yes, yes," I said. "You're right. It counts." "I think you're right."
Thank you, Cindy. I've seen it before, but I don't know. I keep getting so overwhelmed by all these different parts of the program, I can't talk when I'm supposed to. We are coming to the last part of the program. You've all been very patient. It's been a long program, but it's been a wonderful program. And now we have our second and last panel, which is on combating intimate partner violence. And the moderator is Rosemond Pierre Louis, do I say correctly? Who is going to introduce the panelists. She's the moderator, and if the panelists for the last panel will please come forward.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's great to see all of you. As Rochelle said, I am Rose Pierre Louis, the Chief Operating Officer at the McSilver Institute for Poverty Policy and Research at New York University, and I'm truly honored to be a part of this discussion with this panel of experts. Let me begin first by thanking our sponsors for bringing us together and for continuing to shine the light on intimate partner violence. I'd like to especially thank Rochelle for inviting me, and of course Joan Dean for introducing me to Rochelle. It's so important that we continue to have these conversations. And I just want to say to the previous panel, thank you so much for your courage, for uplifting the voices of women and others who've experienced violence. It is through these stories that we help to raise awareness. And today, we'll also talk a little bit about allyship as part of the conversation around combating domestic violence. So I feel like this is a reunion of some sort. I practiced law for 17 years and was the first senior staff attorney at Sanctuary for Families back in the day where there was only 3 attorneys, and now there's so many. And of course, I served as the former commissioner of the mayor's office to combat domestic violence, and so it's just great. I've worked with your organizations, and it's lovely to be here. With that being said, today we've convened the best of the best in terms of those who are service providers, thought leaders, policymakers, activists, and advocates who are really making a difference in this space and are leading organizations that are really making a difference, not only locally in New York City, but statewide and nationally. And in the interest of time, you all have the bios of all of our panelists. So what I will do is just introduce them by their name and title, and as part of the conversation, we'll be able to elicit more about who you are as a leader in this space, but also the work of your organization. Also, we'll, time permitting, Rochelle will ask, we'll have some time for some Q&A. All right, so I'm going to start first with Bea Hansen, who is the Senior Advisor at the New York City Mayor's Office to End Domestic and Gender-Based Violence. I always got to bring that back. To my left is Judy Kluger, who is the, well, I should say Judge Judy Kluger. And she'll talk a little bit more about her experience, but Judge Kluger is the Executive Director of Sanctuary for Families. We also have Nahama Baxt. Okay, I'm a Pierre Louis, so you know I experience this a lot. So my apologies. You are who is the Senior Director of Family Violence Services at the Metropolitan Council on Jewish Policy, and Elena Morgan Ramjit, who is a Computing Innovation Fellow at the Clinic to End Tech Abuse at Cornell Tech. So welcome and thank you so much for being here. I'm going to ask a series of questions that really help to create an understanding for those who may not be working in this space, or someone who is a survivor who may be coming here to seek information, or just someone who has been touched by this issue through their family or a friend or colleague who's experienced domestic violence. So, Bea, I want to start off with you, given your background both locally and nationally. Help create a foundation of understanding in terms of the scope and the impact of domestic violence here in New York City.
Thanks, Rose. It's so great to see you.
Great to see you.
And Judy, and it's really nice to be here and to be in person. I don't think I've done much in person lately, so and I want to thank everybody for coming out to be here. Yeah, and I appreciate the survivor panel and Cindy's your amazing video. I think in terms of thinking about the scope, I think a lot of people talked about this already in the survivor panel. When it's hard to look at scope because I think people think about numbers, and so we have the numbers of like 1 in 4 women are seriously physically abused and intimate partners, and 1 in 7 men. Here in New York City, we can throw out all kinds of statistics. Like, for example, there's approximately 200,000 domestic incident responses by NYPD every year. And about half of those are intimate partner violence. The other half of them are family violence cases. So the cases that you talked about earlier of like those kids who there might be sibling on sibling violence, or an elder person and an adult person, but half of them are intimate partner violence. When we look at it nationally, and New York is no different here, about 80% of survivors don't go anywhere for services. And that's kind of a big thing that we're thinking about now, about how do we, because I can talk about the NYPD stats. I have reams of them here. I can go through, but I think the bigger issue is that 80% of survivors aren't going anywhere for services, and that feels like the biggest thing that we have to address. How do we support survivors getting access to services? And we know here in New York City that we have particular issues in Black and brown communities around accessing services and around the impact of violence. So, for example, Black women in New York are more than 2.5 times more likely to be a victim of intimate partner violence. And how we look at the issues of systemic racism in the response in terms of addressing some of those issues. Before I leave, I just want to say one. I think we have seen, though, we haven't seen a lot of change in like serious felony assaults. It's about 40% of serious felony assaults in New York City are related to domestic violence. But we have seen homicides go down over the last 15 years or so. So they've been steadily decreasing. Still, 1 is way too many, but an average of about 37 homicides a year to 27. So we're seeing decreases, but until we get to 0, it's not going to be enough. So I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you so much, Bea. So there's a wealth of experience here on this panel, and it's really important to understand sort of the composition of the safety net here in New York City, and would really love to hear from each of you the role that your organizations play in providing services to survivors of intimate partner violence. So, Judge Kluger?
Thank you, Rose, and really nice to see everyone here, and again to the survivor panel. I was so touched by much of what you said, in particular, the idea that why is it always on the victim? Why did you stay? I was once on a panel, and I had the presence of mind. It was a TV show, and it was all about someone who didn't leave and the ramifications to her and others. And I said to the moderator, let's flip it. Let's say, why did he do what he did rather than why did she leave? So you brought all that back to me, so thank you. I've been involved in this work for my entire professional life. I started my career as a prosecutor in Brooklyn when no one took domestic violence seriously at all. And just to give you like a snippet of what even the laws were like, right? You had to prove earnest resistance if you were a victim of rape. Whereas if someone robbed you, you didn't have to, there didn't have to be earnest resistance, there didn't have to be any other witnesses. You were allowed to rape your wife. And if you were a victim of domestic violence, you had to decide whether you were going to go to family court or have a criminal case within 72 hours. So we've made progress in those areas. That being said, my organization, Sanctuary for Families, still handles about 1,000 cases and clients involved in intimate partner violence. We started as a shelter about 38 years ago, and very soon it was clear that clients needed more than shelter. They needed legal help, they needed counseling, they needed job training, and they needed advocacy. So that is what we do. We try and serve holistically the needs of victims of domestic violence and their children. And part of our mission statement is that freedom from domestic violence is a basic human right. And we're not there yet, but there is help in New York City. And I will say, to the credit of B and the Mayor's Office to Combat Gender-Based Violence, there is a lot more available in New York City than there is in other places of the state and certainly around the country. So we're fortunate in that way, but we're fortunate in a situation that is very unfortunate for the people who we need to serve. But we have hotlines, our doors are open. There is, maybe B will speak to this, the family justice centers, which are walk-in centers, pre-COVID and now again walk-in, that anyone can access services from our organization and many others. So there's help. We just have to make sure people know and feel that they can come for that help.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Yes. I'm Nechama Baxt. I'm the Senior Director of the Family Violence Services Program at Met Council. No, sorry. Yes, can you hear me? Sorry. Sorry. It has been such a remarkable afternoon. I'm really touched to be a part of such an important conversation. I feel like Sean and I want to do a grounding exercise and kind of center myself, because each person who spoke had so much depth and weight to everything that was said, and such an honor to be here. I have the privilege of being, leading a wonderful group of professionals at Met Council, where we provide services directly to survivors of intimate partner violence and sex trafficking in New York City. All of our staff have their master's degrees and specialized counseling and trauma treatment. We offer financial assistance, food assistance, access to supportive benefits. We work with the Mayor's Office. We are on site at the Family Justice Centers and work very closely with Sanctuary and Cornell Tech. So we're very I'm proud to partner with you here. But we take a very person-centered approach to our the way we work with clients. Not every survivor is the same, because not every human is the same. Not every person needs the same things, and we don't dictate what people need. We offer support based on what individuals who come to us want. So if somebody wants to stay in a relationship because that is what they are choosing, we will try to help them to be able to stay in a way that feels as safe as possible. And when or if someone chooses to be ready to leave, we will partner them with legal services. We'll partner them with other supports to help them leave if that's what they want. We're here in any way to anyone who needs help.
The Mayor's Office to End Domestic and Gender-Based Violence, as Judy was saying, runs the Family Justice Centers, which are kind of a many services, one place kind of place. I think we used to call it one stop, and shopping, and I don't like that. So I just said many services, one place, and and we have Met Council's there, and Sanctuary's there, and Cornell Tech is there, and the idea is that we have one place for folks to go to get all of the services that they need. Law enforcement's there. They can access district attorney's offices. The other pieces of the work that our office does is around, and kind of the work that I do is around creating new programming. So we started a domestic violence task force a couple of years ago, and we came up with 32, I think, new initiatives that we wanted to work on. And so we are launching the last of those 32 in the next couple of months or so. But really trying to figure out, how do we do our work better? So, some of it is involved, some of the things that folks talked about before, of making sure that there's education programs for younger kids. So we've got programs in high schools, middle schools. We just put together a curriculum for elementary school students about healthy relationships and starting with healthy friendships. So that kind of work is being done. We have a new program that we're about to launch called Home Plus, which is to help support survivors stay in their home and with an alarm system to help them to stay in their home. We're going to be doing emergency lock repair and replacement. So that's been something new that we're doing. So we're always trying new kinds of programs, and we've done a lot of work with Cornell Tech, which you'll talk about dealing with cyber abuse kinds of issues, and so this kind of runs the gambit of all those kinds of new programming, policy kind of work to really help support the service providers, because as Judy was saying, we have really robust services. We are, I used to head up the Office on Violence Against Women at the Department of Justice in the Obama administration, and know firsthand the breadth of kind of service availability in New York City is just unparalleled in terms of really small community-based organizations that are focused on very geographic community or language-specific communities or LGBT communities, to kind of large organizations like Met Council and Sanctuary doing this work. They're really robust services, and I think the point is, how do we make sure that folks can access the services and that the services meet the needs of individual survivors?
Hi. So my name is Lana. I work with the Clinic to End Tech Abuse at Cornell Tech, and we partner closely with the Mayor's Office to End Gender-Based Violence. We are one of the services that they refer survivors and victims to when they come in. And what we specifically do is that we pair incoming clients, as we call them, or survivors, with a volunteer technologist or technology expert who can help them with issues such as experiencing location tracking or stalking or unauthorized access to their bank accounts, their financial accounts, their social media, their Gmail. This clinic was founded at Cornell Tech, and I have to give credit to Tom Ristenpart and Nicole Adele, the professors who founded it, and of course to the NGBV, because they were indispensable partners in making sure that, even though I think that we often think of engineering and technology as a field as being very cold and very inhuman, and they have made sure from the beginning to make sure that it is trauma informed, that it is centered on the needs of survivors, and to stay, as one of my co-panelists pointed out, to support survivors in whatever it is that they're trying to do, whether they're trying to stay in the situation that they're in, and to not be judgmental and just provide the support that they need as a neutral partner. So if I had one thing that I wanted to say about the role of technology in domestic violence, it's that I think that there's often this sense of, why don't you just why don't you just leave, but why don't you just put your phone down, and why don't you just walk away from, get a new email account, change your phone number. And it can be much more complicated than that in many, many ways. So, oftentimes it's the abusers will target, a business page that was set up on Facebook or Instagram, so it's their livelihood, or their work emails are being targeted, or their ability to contact their family. Stealing even their photos, it doesn't have to be about productivity. That's a very personal thing that we should all feel entitled to, is to have ownership over our own memories. So we help with all of those issues as best as we can. And in addition to that, we, as a research university, we also take that research and we try and advocate for laws based on what we're seeing. So for instance, the Safe Connections Act is something that has been advocated for by our organization, which allows anyone who has been experiencing domestic violence or intimate partner violence to leave a phone plan, because they couldn't do this before, without the permission of the account holder, so that they, and someone that you were on the same account with, can see, for instance, who you're calling, your text messages, and a lot of very personal information. So to keep this brief, I'll end there, but there's a lot of fantastic work that we do, and we're grateful to have such great partners like Sanctuary for Families and NGBV.
I'm so happy that you talked about the work that you're doing, because I do think the perceptions about intimate partner violence, for those who are not as familiar with it, it's often just defined as physical violence, and not really understanding the dynamics of DV, and that the financial abuse, but how technology is being used. And I think about, how perpetrators of violence also use use tech and social media to often harass the advocates that are providing support. I think about a particular case at Sanctuary, these situations we have to continue to raise a lot of awareness about for survivors, because when you think about a survivor who may be in the midst of trauma, trying to think of a safety plan, trying to get their children to safety, trying to get navigating resources, perhaps the last thing they may be thinking about is technology. So I'm so happy to hear of the work and to be able to disseminate information about that. When I think about, you have government that has resources for survivors. You have an array of not-for-profit organizations of all different sizes that provide services and are extremely important. We have universities that do this kind of work. And of course, you have law enforcement agencies. I'm going to ask this to everybody to give their thoughts. How does that all get integrated? Because I think about, for survivors, again, in the midst of a crisis, trying to navigate all of these systems to be able to get help. How do we make sure that we are doing our part to raise awareness about this? And what's the thinking around the integration? Like, how did this really emerge? And I know, given your background, really all of you in terms of your backgrounds, like, how does this get all integrated so that it's just not dizzying for survivors to navigate services?
So I'll start. Sometimes it is dizzying, and the court system in particular is dizzying. And if you're a victim of domestic violence and you want to have a case in family court, you want to get a divorce, and there's a criminal case. Right now, it's 3 different courts, 3 different judges. They don't necessarily know about each other or what the orders have been. Now, I was involved when I was with the courts in setting up these integrated domestic violence courts where it's 1 family, 1 judge. But it was a workaround to a system that is completely Byzantine. We have 11 different courts. And right now, the chief judge, who I actually saw today, is pushing very hard to have the legislature, because it can't be done by the courts. It has to be done by the legislature and then by all of you. There's going to be a constitutional amendment, hopefully in a couple of years, to restructure the courts. So it's a little bit of a mess in the courts. What we all try to do, and what we do at Sanctuary, at least if you come through our doors, there is legal help, there's counseling, there's job training, there's advocacy. And just a piece about our legal work, it's not just, and Rose was a lawyer there. We have lawyers in family court, we do immigration work, we do housing work, we do public benefits, we help clients get divorces. And in the meantime, whatever else they need to keep them safe and independent, we have. But there aren't enough of us, and there aren't enough resources, as rich as New York City is in that. So we have to fix the courts, but we also have to figure out how to make all survivors aware of what is available, and try and do a 1 location resource for them, which is a little bit about what we do, and also the family justice centers. If I could take just a word on cyber sexual abuse and technology abuse. We have clients who get 1,000 text messages from their abuser in the course of a couple of days. There have also been situations, and we were advocates with others to get a law to prevent this, that you've had a relationship and there have been photos taken of you consensually. And now the relationship is over, and your abuser just decides that everybody they know plus should be seeing these photos. So this is something that didn't exist 20 years ago, the ability for someone to abuse in that way. So now there are laws in place to prevent that. But the importance of being able to change your phone number, get out of phone plans, and really to understand as a survivor, as a victim, that if someone is constantly texting you, and I'm not even talking about 1,000, maybe it's 20 in the course of a day, you're in a dangerous situation. That is power and control, right? It's not always physical abuse. It's power and control. I want to know where you are. I want to know what you're doing. You better respond to me right away.
So going back to the integration question.
Yes, I'm with you. I think the mayor's office tried to do that, is trying to do that with having the family justice centers. I think that's the point of them, is to have that space. It's really hard. It's a lot. And what we do is really come alongside. So we're coming alongside in each step so that any survivor knows, I'm right here. You're not doing this alone, because often they feel so, most people in those situations feel so alone and confused, because it's confusing sometimes even for us as advocates. There's a new law, there's a new system, we have new housing requirements, new this requirements, and so it's dizzying for us, and we know it's dizzying for clients, and we try our best to come alongside them on their journeys, provide support, provide group, so that they're meeting other survivors who are in their same experience, so that they're no longer isolated.
Thank you. B.
When you asked the question, Rose, it reminded me of this poster that the Voices of Women, which is a group of survivors, had put together, and it was a poster of just a legal-sized piece of yellow legal paper with like all of these different phone numbers and then these arrows around it, and it was all about just how convoluted and complex the system is, like Judge Kluger was talking about. And and I think, and Judge Kluger's done an incredible job of trying to, work within that system when she was a judge around integrating those pieces. And I think that is the point of the Family Justice Centers, to do that as well, to have one place where people go. Part of what we do in the Family Justice Centers as well is that we have, there's a lot of community-based organizations that can't have somebody come in and work at that central location. So we have meetings, borough-based meetings with other providers so that we can all coordinate better and make sure that that's happening as well. So that's been a kind of an important role for us to play. Also, just the expansion of our purview from the Office to Combat Domestic Violence to the Office to End Domestic and Gender-Based Violence, to incorporate issues of sexual violence and trafficking and stalking and family violence. So because none of those kinds of victimizations didn't have a home, if they didn't have a nexus directly with domestic violence. And I think the other role our office plays is coordinating on a city level, which is also very difficult to do because there's lots of city agencies that are very big, and domestic violence can be little bits of things. So finding those kind of places where we can do that kind of coordination, and we see that as our role.
I love the Family Justice Centers. I mean, I remember when the RFP came out, the first RFP came out for the Family Justice Centers, and to really see the number of people that are served every year through the FJCs, the not-for-profit organizations that are on-site, that are off-site, this investment by the government to support family justice centers, it's incredible, and to have one in every borough has been transformational. And when you think about, when you were using the phone or trying to develop a process of referral where you could track what happened to a particular survivor seeking services. So to have a resource like this, along with organizations like all of yours, is really an important model to see, and it's great that there's that integration around understanding the interconnectedness around the sexual violence as well as trafficking, because they are interrelated. So I'm sorry, Dr. Ramjeet. Just on the integration, did you want to add anything else onto that?
Sure. I think that there's a couple things that I'd like to say. So one of them is that as a service provider, I would say that one of the most important things for us is humility. We work with so many great people, and we need to understand what we can help with, and then make sure that we are going back to advocates and caseworkers who our expertise is in other areas. And on that note, I would also like to add that, I think another really important thing for helping survivors navigate the sheer amount of resources out there is being able to support our advocates and to make sure that they have the time to have training and learn about the fact that CEDA exists, and that if you are, learn to recognize the signs of technology abuse, that they can take time off and go learn about our services, learn when to refer it, and learn about other services that are out there. So I think being able to support our advocacy workers and making sure that they have the time and space to do that is really important. And to also view the rest of our community outside of the NGBV as responders to domestic violence and intimate partner violence, so that banks and the Genius Bar and customer support and Airbnb and all of these places, when they are, talking to someone on customer support, or when they're talking to a client that is, saying, my ex-partner, I think that they withdrew all my money from my bank account, that they're like, oh, first of all, do you need to be connected with these resources? And, bring in those members of our community and try and make sure that they participate in it with us, because, like you said, there's only so much that we can do if they're not using our services, and we're often not the first stop for, survivors. Oftentimes when we talk to them, they're like, well, we called Apple, but they didn't believe me. So we need those places to be part of the network that is, referring people to their local organizations that are trained in advocacy to help them.
So our previous panel really touched upon that question, that when we talk about the work that we do, and for those who may not be as familiar, again, with the dynamics of intimate partner violence, and suggest, why did the person stay, or they must have liked it, all of the things that, sadly get said in this context, understanding that their lives may be endangered, the lives of their family members or their children, or financially, they may not have the resources to leave the relationship. So talk about what your organizations are doing, working with survivors on issues of economic empowerment. And I'll just open the floor up to anyone who wants to start.
I'm happy to start. About 10 years ago, during a strategic planning process that we went through, one of the major issues was, how can we get our clients to be economically self-sufficient, because so many times it is economics that keep primarily women staying with their abusers. So we started an economic empowerment program, and what this is a program. It's 4 to 6 months to provide living wage skills for living wage jobs. And we've been able to train about 1,000 women, but it's not enough. And we help them get jobs so that they have financial independence. But many of our clients and others around the city, for a variety of reasons, that kind of program does not work for them. Either they, some are undocumented, so it's very hard to get work. Others are not cut out for a 9-to-5, if that still exists with COVID, job. So we've just recently partnered with the Center for Family Life to create a workers' co-op, where it can be either for cleaning, for childcare, that the clients incorporate this workshop. They set the rules. They're protected because they're part of an organization, and they get, hopefully, not taken advantage of. So that's just, we have to be very creative, because not everybody fits, sometimes it's whatever, square peg in a round hole. So, but economic freedom brings choice, and that's what we always want to make sure that survivors have.
Thank you. Please.
You have a great program. And we've worked with you in that program, and it is really a model to follow. We don't have such a robust program like that, but we do individually, because we take a very individualized approach when we're able to, pending funding. So we do offer people the opportunity to attend an educational program of their choice. That's not a four-year college, because we couldn't afford to send someone, but to get a certificate program. So we have had clients who became EMTs or medical billers or things like that. And so when we're able to, and we do have the funding, we try to work with the folks at the Family Justice Center to let them know that we have, if the funding comes through for something like that. We have connections in the community as well. So There are training programs that allow for people to learn technology, to learn the non-traditional 9-to-5 type jobs, because for many of our clients who are moms and are unable to because they have babies at home, so they have to do remote, COVID has been helpful in that it opened the world of education and employment, and we're trying to maximize it on that and help partner with our clients as best we can to support them on their journey.
B.
Yeah, I think, another thing that I think COVID has done is also look at the importance of money, of direct funding to people in need. And we had a great pilot program that Sanctuary for Families partnered with us on, which was $500,000 that we gave out to just under 400 survivors and we tried to be as low barrier and as open to what survivors needed as we possibly could. There was a model from Washington State that was funded by Bill and Melinda Gates at that time that was really about low barrier funding, and they did some research on the impact of low barrier funding on survivors and just giving survivors money for what they need. So we embarked on a project like that. I think we did an evaluation of it and found that it's very tough to do that with government money. And I think this becomes a kind of a push for government, which we're trying to do is we don't trust survivors, with money. We don't trust poor people with money. And there's so many hoops, and how do we get through those? And that's something we're struggling with. We want to redo this program in a way that is able to be more advantageous for survivors and less of a headache for people. But even with the program that we ran, we gave out $500,000 to people. Half of the people that we surveyed reported that they felt safer after participating in the program. Half of them said their kids felt safer and that their mental health improved. So this is a huge thing that I think government can do, and also we need to do some more partnership with private folks to get that funding out.
I'll mostly pass on this because I touched on this a little bit, but not before I refer everyone to my brilliant colleague, Dr. Rosanna Bellini, who is working on right now a project to combat financial tech abuse and partnering with banks to learn what our role as technologists can be in helping survivors protect their financial status. So, she's putting all of the force, the intimidating force of her brilliance and competence behind that. So I have a lot of faith that we will be seeing some fantastic results from that.
Well, thank you for your leadership, because that's so needed. I really want to talk about allyship. When you think about how much New York State spends in responding to domestic violence, it's a significant amount of money, and creating an understanding and awareness of why, amongst people that don't do this work, why this is so important, why we must elevate and understand that as part of a public safety strategy, we need to also include the safety of intimate partner survivors of gender-based violence. How do we raise awareness? How do we create a city and a community of allies throughout the city? So I'm going to go, starting with you, Dr. Ramji.
I mean, I ask myself this every day, especially when I'm thinking about how this plays out in technology and how this plays out in software development. So my background is actually, my doctorate was in databases, and it was in a very technical field, and it had very little to do with advocacy and abuse. And it is, I think, the way that I think of my work now and what I would like to do is to see how we can get designers of technology to think of part of the initial part of your design of an application, of a system, to be integrated with the community that it will impact, right? To not release an AirTag to call them out into the wild and then see how it will be used, and then later find out that you're constantly getting reports that it was immediately used for stalking, because if they had asked us, if they had contacted the Clinic to End Tech Abuse while they were designing it, we would have immediately let them know that. And we see 3 or 4 this month alone, and every single time I have to tell them, I'm sorry, there's nothing that we can do because it was designed in a way that there is nothing that you can do, because it was designed with the mindset to help people who had lost something, and it wasn't designed thinking about marginalized populations or at-risk populations. So, I wish I had a better answer other than sometimes I just want to shake them and do that, but I'm hoping that it's through, organizations like CETA, through outreach, through programs like this, through public pressure, that we can demand more from at least corporations, from businesses, from organizations, to say that, the community that you're impacting, the community that you're affecting has to be part of the design from the very beginning. You cannot design something in a vacuum, release it into the wild, and then have all of us spend all of our heart and soul and time and tears fixing it for you. And that is so frustrating. I'm I'm veering into just, a rant about the irresponsibility of technical development, so I'll cut myself off here.
No, you're raising it's a fantastic point, and this is the space for us to raise those issues. At NYU McSilver, we just started an AI project to really look at the intersection of poverty, social justice, gender inequality, because we know in the development of these applications, when you think about just in terms of bias and how that may impact women, one of the things you first give is when you're applying for something for financial support is your zip code. Well, that our chief AI officer talks about bad data and how do we create ethical algorithms and applications so that those kinds of biases are dealt with.
I'll just throw this out here.
Okay.
This is I think one of the things that, if anyone out here knows any way to help solve this, if you register to vote, your address is public information by default, and it takes very, very little amount of information. I could probably find any of your addresses right here in 5 minutes. I sometimes forget my friends' addresses and look it up in the New York City voters election database if I'm lost. My point here is that these problems are usually not technically difficult to solve. They are not things where you need to be a cybersecurity expert who's, out there with tweezers and a microscope, moving the silicon around or anything like that. They're very simple to solve, and we know how to solve them as technologists. There's just very little willpower, to connect those pieces together. So my point is that they're usually not that difficult to solve technologically. And my sub-point to that is if anyone knows anyone that I can talk to about how we can make sure that, your address is not public information so that survivors of domestic violence and intimate partner violence can vote and be a civic participant, please
Excellent.
contact me.
Excellent. That's an excellent point. And maybe there are some elected officials who could also champion some of that work. So just in the interest of time,
I'll be quick.
Nakama.
Yeah, it's a huge question, and I kind of want to go back to Shoshana from the previous panel. How do we talk to each other and have those conversations? I think I did a bystander intervention training not too long ago, and and for people to think about what would you do if you witnessed intimate partner violence? What would you do? And it doesn't mean that you have to jump in there and be Superwoman and intervene. But there are responses that you can make that are within your comfort zone. So I think, really thinking about that you can do something and what that is. And I've been doing this work for a long time, and I feel like I really struggled with, well, what can I do in those moments if I'm seeing something on the subway? So I think that's one. And then the other one is really knowing resources. We put so for yourself, for other people, and trying to be that support, being that support person and talking about it. We have a website, NYC Hope, which has got all the resources in New York City for gender-based violence. So if you need resources, those are right there. But I think talking about it is really, really critical.
Yes. No. Yeah, I do think that the more we speak about it, the more we connect and engage, the more it becomes something that's just part of basic conversation and education. That goes back to what the first panel was saying. So it becomes something that's in elementary school. We know about how to have relationships and what's a healthy relationship and what's not, and my body's mine. And that's for boys, girls, they, them, it doesn't matter. Everyone deserves that autonomy of knowing that they are safe. So I think just having that conversation from early on and agree about technology and resources and advocacy, I think it's all.
So I just say we have to get more men involved in this issue. Look around the room. I think I see one man, maybe two, and one is the photographer. I think it's not a women's issue. It's a human rights issue. So we have to find a way to make allies with men because it's not just about women. It's about all of us.
Yes, and I agree. We have to continue to bring men in as allies and to make the connection about this could be your sister, your friend, someone you know. So thank you for saying that. So I think we're way over time, and we have a wealth of information here from panel 1, panel 2, and thank you so much for your leadership, for what you've done for such a long time to serve survivors of intimate partner violence, and I hope that we can continue to have these conversations and grow resources, advocate for more legislation, reach out to the Board of Election to make sure that we are pushing for the legislation and policies that benefit survivors of intimate partner violence. Thank you so much.
Thank you to Rose and our wonderful panelists. Thank you to everyone that participated. Jessica, thank you for your partnership in Roosevelt House and for PACE as well. And well, I'm just going to end with one thing as we're in Roosevelt House. I don't usually admit it in public, but I live very close to the statue of Eleanor Roosevelt at the bottom of Riverside Park, 72nd Street, and I talk to her quite often. I really just talk in my head, so you know that nobody's going to take me away, but I do talk to her very often, and I told her this was going to happen, and I do think she would have been very, very pleased with this afternoon. So thank you, everybody.